So we're gonna start with the second class on the Tomer Devorah, Rabbi Moshe Cordover's Tomer Devorah, which is one of the most important works in Kabbalah. It's like we mentioned last week. It's actually a very user-friendly. It's probably one of the most user-friendly Kabbalistic books, because most Kabbalistic books that you'll pick up are completely esoteric. They're completely out there, like out of the field. You know, this is one of the few books that the Kabbalists kind of like bring down. The Ramak kind of like brings down to our level. But still, as much as it isn't to our level, I got some feedback from somebody that was listening to the class last week, and he was saying that was like, whoa, that was like out of the field. I don't know how attainable that is for anybody. And I'll tell you what we spoke about last week, and what the Ramak's work is essentially about. The Ramak's work is about the 13 attributes of mercy. And the reason why the book is about the 13 attributes of mercy is because that is the way God relates to the world in a way that actually supersedes the finite. Whereas the finite is, kind of like puts our existence in a box. And if we get out of the box, we've kind of like broken out of the box, and therefore we've done something wrong and it's hard to repair. And where does healing come from? Where does repair come from if we've already skewed off the path, So where does healing come from? Healing comes from beyond self and beyond the box. And in this context, the Kabbalistic context over here that is that it comes from the 13 attributes of mercy, which the 13 attributes of mercy, the Ramak describes as coming, as referring to Keter, to crown. And that's the Kabbalistic description of God's closest thing that we could understand as essence of God, right? Where we talk about the crown and our description, let's say, of a king, right, or a queen. So there's the king and the queen, the way they act and what they do and who they rule over. And then there's their crown, which is the representation of who they are in their essence. And it goes even beyond the king and queen. As smart as they are, as talented as they are, as charismatic as they are, when you talk about the crown is the crown. You can't mess with the crown of the king and the queen. So when we talk about the crown on the spiritual level, it refers to the realm of the essence, and it's the beyond finite. And the Ramak, like we mentioned last week, the Ramak wrote this book, and he goes through the 13 attributes of mercy in a way that we should actually resemble those 13 attributes of mercy, that we should act like the divine. And by acting like the divine, and by being like the divine, we actually are close to the divine, right? Because excuse me a second. Yes. So Ilana, we're going to go through. We're going to go back through the 13 attributes again. I just wanted to mention that the Ramak once again writes this work. Why? In order for us to actually resemble the divine. So when we resemble the divine, that's the truest goodness that we could receive in this world. Correct? What is the greatest goodness that a mortal, finite being could receive in this world? A new car, a good hamburger, a good what? A good smile, right? what is the greatest goodness that somebody could receive in this world? Now, why did you even say a smile? Because a smile actually is something which is like lights somebody's existence, and it actually comes from something beyond, right? But really, what is the ultimate goodness that one could receive in this world is to resemble the divine. Because when we resemble the divine, we're vessels to be able to receive that goodness, right? Because we are connected to that goodness, right? And the Torah speaks about that if we want to come close to God, we have to hidabik b'midotov. We have to cling to his midot, to cling to his deeds, to his attributes. And actually it says that God actually, the beginning of the Torah and the entire Torah really is all about clinging to God's attributes. And the beginning of the Torah, it's very interesting, right there in Genesis, Adam and Eve are unclothed, they're naked beings, and God helps them get clothes, right? He says, okay, you have to cover yourself. So God acts in a merciful way. And at the end of the Torah, when Moses dies, God personally buries Moshe. So, right, the beginning of the Torah, the end of the Torah, and everything really in the middle is like the midos of Hashem, the attributes of Hashem. And I'll tell you why specifically where there's a special merit and virtue in learning this book during this time, because this time is the month of Elul, which is a very important time. That during the month of Elul the 13 attributes are prevalent in the world during this time. So the 13 attributes it says like God is in the field. 13 attributes are here. And the way that we could connect to those 13 attributes besides them being here, right, is by us acting in the way of the 13 attributes. And when we act in the way of the 13 attributes, we actually are able to receive those 13 attributes because we resemble them. So let's go through what we spoke about last week. And I'm going to share that over here on the screen, and I'm going to have it in English. So I'll, please God, email it to whoever would like. So the 13 attributes start off with the first attribute is Mi El Kamocha, who is a God like you. And we said, who is a God like you? That refers to God is called the embarrassed king, or the king that is mocked. And that refers to how, although God is disrespected in the sense of mortals, right? And existence doesn't really take into account where their life force comes from. And with that very life force, they actually rebel against the godly life force, which is within them, being as it is, and God is embarrassed and is hurt by that. It's like somebody doing something good for you, and you take that same goodness and you use it against them. It says, nevertheless, God keeps on flowing, giving goodness, giving life over to existence constantly. Although mortals use that against God. So the Ramak says, so to us, when we when our goodness is taken advantage of, and people and people are not appreciative of our goodness. So instead of taking the normal human approach of saying, okay, this guy is just not appreciative, I'm just not going to speak to him, I'm just like, that's it, like, I'm done, right? The godly approach and the higher way is regardless of the way this person is acting, I'm just like God keeps on giving me life, so too I am still going to give over goodness and to continue to do good for this person regardless. So that's the first attribute. The second attribute is even higher.
So what would you simply define the first attribute
as the name for it is Mi El Kamocho, who is a God like you, which refers to God's free-flowing goodness. Free-flowing goodness. We want to resemble God. God is free-flowing, free-giving. So too, a person, now this is a very high level, because our human and egotistic beings are actually not used to this, and we're actually it's just the opposite. We are, when somebody hits, we want to hit back. When somebody says something, we want to say back, right? So God's way is to actually keep on giving goodness. So second attribute is actually higher than the first one, is noseh avon, that God takes the sin and sustains the sin. And that refers to when a person does any act, a good act or a negative act, he creates a spiritual entity. There's a result. There's an effect to the cause, right? Whatever a person does, if he does good deeds, and actually we learn that every word of Torah or every mitzvah that a person does, he creates angels up above that surround the person, that aid a person in his life. And if a person does something negative, that creates a negative angel. So God doesn't just give us free-flowing life, but he also sustains the angel, which we created. The third level is Vover al Pesha, and that's a higher level than even that. That God himself actually washes the sin, right, and the shmutz, the dirt, basically, off the person himself. The person got themselves into it, and they got themselves into this mess, right? And God could, let's say, keep on giving free flowing life, right? Good vitality. God could, let's say, wait up on that person until he comes to things on their own. It says God is so great that he actually, over al pesha, that he himself actually involves himself in helping the very person who rebelled against him, and he washes him. So to us, so to we should learn from here that if a person did something to us, so we shouldn't just suffice in saying like, okay, we forgive the person and we'll maybe just overlook and whatnot, but we should look for ways of how to help this person and how to actually help them better their lives, just like God does that for us. The fourth level, right? This is like each one of them is like,
Could you just say the third one
in capsule?
Yes.
So God washes the sin and the sinner. In other words, the mistake, right? God washes the mistake away.
Would forgive.
Would forgive and helps wash us, right? Doesn't just forgive. That's what he does in the second level. On this third level, God himself is not just forgiving, but he's actually proactively, right, helping us correct our mistake and overcome them.
So we should emulate that.
So we should emulate that, right? And I mentioned last week that this is really really parenting advice. Like, this is just incredible parenting advice, because a child is really our relationship of father child or mother child and or whatnot is really, it's like the divine. It's like the relationship that we have with God. and the relationship that we should have with our children is also needs to be on this level, sort of like where God is free flowing. So our relationship with our children has to be on a level that it's not really dependent on them, doing things just because we did them, or just because I want them to do it this way, and because maybe they, and they may make mistakes, like we make mistakes, but God like weighs up, he takes the time and he just like, okay, he created this mistake, but after a while, they'll correct their mistake. But not only that, like we're learning now, the third level is that God himself helps the person correct the mistakes. So too, like the parent kind of like comes in and almost like, fixes this mistake over here of the child. And I mentioned that's kind of like, well, again, like kind of like creating like a party, if a child comes in and makes a whole mess in the house, and so the parents could either go away, or they could actually sometimes even get in there and maybe even like clean up the house, right? And so fourth level is l'sherit nachalato, for the remainder of his inheritance, and that refers to the inheritance over here that we're talking about is that God and us we're interconnected with him, right? And so this relationship actually goes way deeper than there's a mistake and because, right, or there's something good that happens. It's an innate relationship because we are connected to the divine in right, in who we are, in our deepest selves, in our soul. That's who we are. We're a piece of the divine, and therefore, when we make a mistake, what occurs is we're actually hurting our own soul root, right? So too, and this is unbelievable. When another person makes a mistake, it should bother us because they are us. We are them. Like we're all interconnected, just like God is connected to us. So too, we are connected to one another. And when one person makes a mistake, then it's not just their mistake. It's like that person that's making a hole inside of the boat. He's not just making a hole in there in his own deck over there. Everybody's going to sink. So one person's good deed, one person's mistake is basically everybody else's. So although I could, same with good deeds, right? So although I could be, just fine, or I think that I'm fine. Nobody's really just fine, but I could think, I'm, within a good place, but my friend is not. So the truth is that I am also not where I should be. Like they say a story about Rabbi Mendel of Vitebsk, who was one of the students of the Baal Shem Tov, that he made Aliyah. He came to the land of Israel, and he settled here in Tzfat. Actually, he lived here in Tzfat, and he said he couldn't fall asleep because of the sound of the angels. The angels clapping, their wings clapping. So he couldn't fall asleep in Tzfat, so he had to leave Tzfat. I don't know if anybody here has that problem, sleeping here. But the Rabbi Mendel of Vitebsk had this issue. He couldn't sleep in Tzfat because of the sound of the angels. So he decided to go to Tiberias. And there he settled, and he basically passed away there. But they say about Rabbi Mendel of Vitebsk before he came to the land of Israel that they told him that there's a saying that Mashiach has come, and they came to the door of the tzaddik and they knocked on his door. He said, "Mashiach has come, Rebbe. Do you what do you say?" The Messiah, right? So what he did was he opened up his window, and he took like a smell, like he took a breath, and he's like, he closed the window again. Nope, Mashiach hasn't come. So they asked the question: what if Reb Mendel of Vitebsk knew that Mashiach didn't come? Why do you have to open up the window? and take that smell. And first, why did he have to take a smell? What is that, right? So the answer is that inside of his room, Reb Mendel Vitebsk had the revelation of Mashiach. He was really, like, he was on this incredibly high level, right? But when they told him Mashiach has come, he had to make sure, like he wasn't sure, right? Because outside of his window, he took the smell, and the smell wasn't yet the smell of a perfected world. It wasn't a time of, like, smell has to do with spirituality, has to do with, that's why on Motzei Shabbat we smell the besamim for Havdalah, the spices, because that's the only sense that wasn't polluted in the sin of Adam and Eve, and that's actually the sense that is most associated with Mashiach. Mashiach says that he's going to be able to judge people just by smelling them, not by intellectual, not by any actually, just you can be able to, like, take a smell and just know what's going on. And just, by the way, there was a certain young boy in the Zohar that's called the baby. It's called the Yanuka. It's called the baby that the Zohar speaks about, that he was able to smell on people. He was able to smell all the good deeds and the opposite about them just by taking a smell. And they say that this young boy was a reincarnation of a very, very high soul. But anyways, going back to this attribute over here that we're talking about, l'sherit nachalto, for the remainder of the inheritance. So because we're interconnected to one another, we're affected by each other's good deeds, by each other's mistakes. So therefore, I'm invested in the other person's success, not just because I want, just because of it being a good deed. You know how somebody, like, wants you to be their good deed, so they're doing a good deed for you, and you know you're somebody else's good deed. So that's very nice, but nobody likes to be the good deed of somebody else, because, right, necessarily, right? But you want to feel like this deed is actually because we're interconnected. You're good. You're giving goodness to somebody, or you're trying to help somebody because of that deeper interconnection, not just because of your personal spiritual growth in giving to the other, but because of the deeper connection that we have, right, in terms of our soul roots, in terms of the interconnection of everybody in the world.
Could I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
Does this apply to Jew and Jew, or does it apply to everybody?
To everybody, yeah. So onwards to the fifth one, right? Again, we could stop on each and every one of these and really meditate, and on to the fifth one is that God does not hold his wrath forever. Literally, that, right? Lo ichzik la'adapo, and that this midah has to do
trial
with the attribute of
trial
somebody making a mistake, okay, and that interconnection. But however, the person feels, why did they make that mistake? And they feel actually a sense of a little bit of anger, of hurt on a certain level, although they're forgiving, but there is a little bit an aspect of, like, how could you, why did it reach this level? But it says it's not that way by it could be that judgment, exactly. But it's not that case by the divine, by God, right? That by God, there isn't that judgment. There's that eternal goodness that is never judgmental. The person went through what they went through, and God himself, again, like we just said, God washes the person, and God is interconnected to them. And he doesn't say, well, you had to do this, or this had to happen. And it God is just not considering why the mistake came about. The mistake came about, and he does not hold that judgment, that wrath, and it's completely forgotten.
So that is the body of the fifth.
That's the
What
fifth.
are they called again?
Attributes. And
Or-
midot. Midot literally means finite. A midah literally means a finite embodiment or enclothing, right? And it doesn't, right? And it could be on a physical level, it could be on a spiritual level, and we're talking about over here the midot are obviously spiritual over here, and they're theoretical. They're beyond mine. So the sixth one, here we go. Ki chafetz chesed hu, because God desires chesed, desires mercy. So what this is talking about, that God desires mercy, the Ramak explains that there's a certain heichal, which is a chamber in heaven, which there are specific angels that are commissioned to take an accounting of the good deeds that a person does in this world. So all the good deeds that are done by us actually go up to a certain chamber in heaven, and on that level, that spiritual level, that God overlooks, and we're going to just figure out how that works. Now, it's not so simple, because those angels actually have what we call the attribute of judgment, which is midat hadin. The attribute of judgment actually says, you know what? Why should goodness come down to this person or to these people or to the world? You know, look at this and this and this. That's the attribute of judgment, right? So it depends on the following. If we act in a way of goodness to one another, and we overlook the downfalls and the blemishes, right, and the faulty characteristic traits of the other, and we give to them, so too God reciprocates in the same way, because God actually desires mercy. He wants to act in a merciful way, but in a sense, he can't do it unless we do the same. So when we act in that merciful way, and we give selflessly, so then we cause the attribute of judgment to not be able to have the final say.
Could you repeat that once more?
Yes. God desires goodness. And when he looks at this chamber of goodness, he's ready to give goodness to existence, to the world. But the problem is that there's the side of negativity and the side of judgment. And those are the kind of like the negative angels that come along, and they say that this person or these people or the world actually doesn't deserve it because of how they're acting. So now when people act selflessly by giving to others and overlooking their attribute of judgment, so to speak, right? And the person kind of like overcomes that, you know, that side of the person, that negative side of the person. And they're not looking at the negative aspect of the person, at the cup, at the half full cup, right? And they're looking at the attributes of the person. And this person is actually does deserve to have goodness, and the person overlooks that side of judgment. So then God reciprocates in the same way, and God says, yes, now I could say to these angels, I'm not gonna speak to you, right? And I'm gonna give goodness to all of existence and free flowing goodness. So, right. So in the mechanics, so to speak, of existence, there we have the attribute of good, and we have the negativity as well, and God is ready to give free flowing kindness, and He does give free flowing kindness. But when there's the attribute of negativity that kind of like holds things back, what accelerates or what precipitates, right, the process of the flow of energy of goodness to the world is when we act in that way. And that's actually the great importance of charity, of when a person gives charity. What we do over there is we're helping God, in a sense, bring down goodness into the world by in a sense overlooking our own place of constriction and our own place of judgment, and we overlook that. So, one second. I'm sorry. I'm just going to share my screen over there. I'm not sure if I shared it before. Oh boy, I don't know if I shared my screen. Sorry about that. Okay. So too, so that attribute of kindness draws down also the kindness of God to come down to the world. Okay. So the seventh midah that the Ramak speaks about is Yashuv Yarachamenu, that God is going to come, is to return and to have mercy to us or for us. And that refers to as follows. When a person angers his friend, okay, when somebody does something to you, right? So we could overcome it, but in a sense, we're always going to, we don't even know how our subconscious works. Our subconscious works it's like so delicate. People say things to us, and people, and as children, and etc. Things are just like we're such delicate beings, and we don't even realize that we may harbor things. But when a person does something negative to us, we will never truly be able to go back to the way it was really before there was that issue, right? We have to kind of like turn over a new page, and we have like kind of like a quarrel, an argument with somebody. It can't go back to the way it was. It has to actually either go up to a new level, or just the relationship just has to like transform to something else, because now it's just different because of that circumstance of argument. But by God, that's not the situation. Yashuv Yarachamenu, that by God, when a person returns to God, God looks at us in the same exact way as He did before we made the mistake. And there was like no problem. It's as if we never did anything wrong. And that's like a very high level. It's a very difficult level to reach, right? To reach that level of, right, there's no problem, there's no issue over here. So he brings here, very interesting, he says that the world was created with the letter Hey, right? The Talmud speaks about this, that the world was created with the letter Hey. And the reason for that is that, very interesting, the letter Hey is shaped like this, right? And the reason why the world was created with the letter Hey is that there's a lot of places that a person could fall basically out of that hay, right? In other words, it's a very like tenuous. Our existence is like very delicate. But the thing about the hay is that we could return, and that's actually the letter for teshuva, for return, because the word for teshuva is tashuv hay, that the hay should return back to its source. Now, what does this mean? It means that a person could fall because he stumbles, kind of like goes down from the hay, and the hay kind of like has that person going like down, like going down that way, where a person stumbles, but the person can't come back up the same way, can't go up that way again, because right, he already fell down from there. He has to find a different venue, and he has to go through actually the little place over there on the hay. The letter hay has got that little opening up above, and he needs to go in through that new opening, and that's the relationship, the new relationship now that he or she has. He has to foster a new relationship. And once that new relationship is fostered now by God, it's actually higher than the level of the righteous, of the tzaddik, the holy person, let's say, that never sinned, that never stumbled, because that person was constant, had that relationship with God, and he never fell out, but he had that level of connection the whole time. But the Baal Tshuva, the person that did the Teshuva, that did the return, he actually has to find a new venue. He has to find like a new way. He has to be kind of like inventive in how he's going to do it. So he has to come back through that little hole over there. And the Ramak says that really what happens is that the Baal Tshuva now actually stands on the roof of the hay. He actually comes back higher, and he's able to kind of like jump on top of that roof, whereas the tzaddik is actually sitting there in the middle, right, in the middle of that hay, but the Baal Tshuva is sitting on the roof of the hay. He actually reached a higher level. And that's the relationship that a Baal Tshuva, that somebody had a mistake, that somebody had a falling, so to speak, with God, has with God. God says, you're back, welcome. I haven't seen you in a while. I've been waiting for you. And it's not like, what happened there? I'm just happy to see you home. And I remember a good friend of mine had a bit of a falling from his like traditional upbringing way of life. He grew up in a household in Crown Heights, and he kind of left the path of Judaism, and he was a very talented like actor, and he acted in plays, Broadway, and this and that. Is very, very interesting fellow. And for years he didn't have a connection to Judaism. And then something changed. It was Passover, and his parents said, how about it? How about joining us? It's like, Mom, Dad, I have a play tonight. Come on, it's Passover. What do you think? It's like, oh, I'll see. So he said, I'll never forget it. He said, his mother said, if you'd like, your seat is here, and it always will be here. And somehow in the middle of that play, it kind of like hit him. It's like, you know what? I want to be there. I want to be sitting in that seat again. And he went back to the seat, and in a sense, like never left that seat. And on a deep level, he never did leave that seat. He was always in that seat, really. And that's the way it is by Hashem, by God. So the eighth level.
How would you, excuse me?
Yes.
How would you, again, encapsulate that one? The person, from what I got, is the person cannot return from an error or a fall or a blemish in the same way that he fell. He has to like kind of wipe the slate clean and then figure out a new way to
reinvent
that
relationship.
His relationship with Hashem. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Right? So like when you fall, you kind of break temporarily for a second your relationship with the Creator, and so when you come back, you're like reestablishing that, and that's what that
right. But even more than that by God's that by God's view on it, God says it's all good. It's all okay.
Right. But the person,
right.
The person has to do that.
He has to come about in a new way, in a different way.
Yeah.
And God is like, welcome home. We've been waiting for you,
Right.
We're, great.
Right.
It's not like, what happened this year, that no judgments. It's just, in fact, that level is even higher than the level of the tzaddik, of the righteous one.
Yeah.
It's incredible, and again, I like to bring this down to like really practical, in parenting, we could all like really, again, like I'm sure you can make like a parenting book out of this, and that's actually an interesting idea to work on parenting according to the Ramak's, Tomer Devorah, that would be very interesting. But even in teaching, because I am a teacher, and in teaching children, I taught special ed for many years. And you have that student that has a hard time, either because of behavior or because of their own learning disabilities. And when that child actually overcomes that hardship that they're going through, and they're able to maybe not get 100 on the test, maybe for them their success is to be able to answer 2 out of the 10 questions. And the teacher modifies it for that student. It's not like you gotta answer it all, then you'll be a really good student. It's like God is like a special ed teacher, in a sense. God God modifies like his, he doesn't modify the Torah, right? And the person has to like want to like aim to do as well as they could do. But in God's perception, you learned the letter Aleph in the Aleph bet, and let's say this other person knows the entire Talmud, and it's not like God loves that person who knows the entire Talmud more than he loves the person who has just learned what the letter Aleph is all about. Maybe in God's eyes, God really loves the person who's just learned the letter Aleph, because the person who learned the letter Aleph actually had to come through that way and had to reinvent themselves in a way that the person who had to learn the entire Talmud would never be able to do in lifetimes, and it's important to look at people that way, not to look at them in terms of who they are and what they are and put tags on them and this and that, but to look deeper into people in terms of where they're coming from, and to kind of appreciate those journeys, appreciate people's journeys. And it's an unbelievable thing. Imagine, I think the world would be a much more of an open place, a beautiful place, if people would not say, oh, this person comes from here, therefore he's that, or that person is this, or he's this type of person, so therefore he's like that, or she's like that. And to look at them more as people, and each person is an individual, that ultimately we all have to do teshuvah. Even the greatest tzaddik, even the person that knows the entire Talmud, has to do teshuvah and to come through that letter hey, and have that personal relationship with the Creator on their level, really on their truest level, on their deepest level. And right, so looking beyond judgment, looking beyond labels, and because God doesn't look at labels, right? So 8th one, here we go. The 8th one is yichvosh avonotenu, that God will subdue our iniquities, our mistakes, our sins. And that has to do with as follows. And the Ramak explains that when a person does any action, so it's similar to the second midah that we're talking about. When a person does any action, there's an effect in the world. When a person does a good deed, a mitzvah, what happens is, as we said, there's a positive angel that's created. So when a person does a mitzvah, what happens is that the mitzvah ascends up to heaven. That the mitzvah ascends. So any mitzvah that we do is a mitzvah means a connection. That's what it means. It's a spiritual connection. It's a flow of energy that comes down into the world, and we're raising up the physicality, right? The materialism of the world via the mitzvah, any mitzvah that we do, and each one of the mitzvahs is connected on different levels, right? Not to get into that right now, but when we do also an avera, when we do a mistake, when we do a sin, that there's also an ascent kind of negative energy that ascends upwards as well. So this is this eighth midah. The eighth midah is the idea that God subdues the negativity of our actions and allows the positive to float upwards in a sense. He kind of like goes boom like that and allows the positive to go upwards. And this is, the Ramak says something so beautiful, something so significant. And, halavai, like I wish we would reach like a little bit of this. But when we look at our friends or we look at somebody, nobody's perfect. We all have positive and we all have things we need to work on. And it's very easy for us to pick out the negative within the person, like right away. Like the person, like we kind of like almost like look and we pick on that. We pick on that and we hit. And what's happening over there is that we are bringing up the negative of the person as opposed to picking the positive of the person. And this is the exact opposite of God's midah, because God's midah is to not to look at the negative, but to pick the positive. To look at the positive midah of the person, to say, I'm going to focus in on that. And that's actually that's the real person. And there's a beautiful Torah of Rabbi Nachman in Breslov, that one of his most famous Torahs in his book Likutei Moharan, he says the Torah which is called Azamra, says that he says something so amazing and relates to exactly what we're saying, that when you pick the good deeds or the good attributes within even the worst sinner, then what you're doing is you are helping that person reach tshuva, to reach a transformation. Why? Because now he's been sifted, so to speak, to become good by this person. This person recognizes that goodness within him.
Does it have to be like directed towards them in a way that they know that you think that? Or
He said no. He says not even. He says just
by thinking.
Just even in our thinking. When you're looking at this person's like full of like, I don't know, tattoos and just like drinking beers all day. I'm going like extreme, whatever it is. And he's like that Harley Davidson dude, and he's like, but you know what? That guy is helped this woman cross the street, or he delivered food for the sick, or he did like, and he looks like he's so rough and gruff and everything like that, but there's that good spark within him. And when you look at the good spark, you raise up the entire person.
Right.
And that's what Rabbi Nachman says.
Does this work with ourselves too?
Absolutely. And this is actually what he says, Rabbi Nachman over there in that midah. He says that a person should also that we need to look at our own good deeds, because we could be so judgmental of ourselves. And he says, Rabbi Nachman says that every day a person should actually, before they go to sleep, kind of like focus in on the good deeds, on the good things that happened to them today, and that they did today. Say, wow, I woke up and I did this, and that went on, and this occurred, and and it's like, it's incredible. We could really, we could do so much in terms of understanding that.
But can that ever lead to arrogance?
No, but he says it's not really arrogance.
No. I mean, I know. I think you can do it. I think you can do it the right way, but could it also, if you do it the wrong way, is it possible to do that?
It could. I assume it could when a person overly does it, right? But this is not. But this specifically is not coming from arrogance, because he's saying the good points are my good. Are really my connections to God, and that right. That's my true self, right? Arrogance is not true self. Arrogance is actually like a person really running, evading really their true self, because really humility. Because really, who are we really on the deepest level? We're we're little, like my one of my teachers says, we're like little like screws in the bigger equation of everything. We're playing a piece in the whole interconnect of relations. So I say that this little screw is really holding up this whole entire machine. It's like saying, like, so really, so this teacher said we just have to be a happy screw, not to be screwed up, but to be a happy screw. So anyway, so we're gonna stop here for today, and God willing, we're going to continue next week with a third part of the Tomer Devorah book. So we did the first 8 midot, and hopefully next week we're going to continue to finish up the rest, and hopefully get closer to Rosh Hashanah. And before Rosh Hashanah, in 2 weeks, we're going to just have a class on what is Rosh Hashanah in crowning the king, and what that means. What is the shofar all about, based on Zohar and the Kabbalistic text.
Great.
So Shabbat Shalom, and
Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi, and God, but great class, really great class. I tell you, I love this. This is just the right stuff.
Baruch
This
Hashem.
time of the year. Yeah.
Thank God. Yeah, we should all have the 13 attributes of mercy, in a revealed way, and hopefully by us just even considering.
Amen.
Just even considering these 13 attributes, which is really just, a little bit acting like, like we should really, like the divine, like following the good example. So then doing that, we draw upon us also the 13 attributes of mercy, and upon the entire world. So Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi. God bless.
Only good things. And many, many blessings to everybody.
Many blessings. Shabbat Shalom.